Welcome to Neuro Talks. For those of you who are new here, my name is Vivian. I'm the head of science at Nurau. And at Neuro Talks, we interview experts from fields related to organizational psychology, managers, workplace. But this week, we will be turning to the topic of AI. And I have here with me Dr. Marianna Ganapini. And we're going to be really discussing the ethics of AI, what the future is, where it's going. So really, really excited for the talk today. So before I turn it over to our discussion, I want Marianna to introduce herself because she has a very interesting background. She's a professor in philosophy, but also she co-founded her own company that does consulting in AI. So Marianna, tell me, what led you to look into AI ethics, and what do you do right now?
Okay, thank you, Vivian. I'm very excited to be here. So what led me to AI ethics or responsible AI is really the sort of the research that I have been doing as a professor. As you mentioned, I'm an associate professor here in upstate New York, and I focused on ethics, philosophy, all things that have to do with sort of the mind and how we should live our lives. And so the issue of AI really came front and center. And I've been doing research with IBM for now 4 years. And as a result of that, we really started to notice that there was a big gap in the market, and there were a lot of talks. There was a lot of talk of like big principles, but very little interest in sort of apply those principles. That was around 2020. Things have changed, but we are excited because we were able to create this company, and we provide services around all things AI ethics, meaning we do courses, training, L&D for companies, but we also do advisory services on products and AI governance. So we kind of span pretty broadly.
Yeah, very cool. So, I titled today's LinkedIn Live AI Ethics, Philosophy and Practice because I think it's really interesting to talk about the two different sides to it. And I love that your background has both the philosophy aspect to it, but then also your startup is more the practical side, like how do we actually enforce this? The reason why I invited you, Marianna, is because I think all of us in the workplace are feeling like it's all over, and it's really taking over AI. Everyone's bringing their own AI to work, but then we're also thinking in the back of our minds, well, who is regulating its use? And you know what are the dangers, I guess, to not regulating the use of AI? So maybe let's start with that question. Who is responsible for regulating the use of AI in the workplace? Is it the government? Is it the company that sells AI tools, or is it the company themselves where workers are bringing their AI to work? Or is it a combination of all of that?
Responsibility for trying to set the rules in place that companies, that citizens can follow, in order to know what is the right responsible use of this technology. So in Europe, the EU AI Act is really the kind of coming out now as the most comprehensive law on AI, and it will have effect also here in the US for like the companies that kind of work with the European citizens or that work in the European market. And the idea of the UI Act is really to try to provide an analysis of risk and a regulatory framework for risk around AI. That brings also the ethical side. It's like law is not the same thing as ethics, but if you start sort of putting in regulations, that allows companies to know what they got to do. So one way to go, if you really are a company and you feel like I want to do the right thing, just look at the UI Act, and this is where you find kind of the clear sort of guidelines, most advanced guidelines in this space. So definitely. And then it's also on us citizens to put some pressure on companies to regulate, to self-regulate, to try to do the right thing by choosing the products that are more transparent, that are more sort of ethically aligned, in order for them, to really feel that kind of pressure. So they
Mhm.
really going to do their best to be doing the right thing. And I understand that that's not necessarily in contrast with the bottom line. Actually, sometimes doing the right thing like gets you a long way in in your sort of desire to please your shareholders and so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, I mean, you said, this phrase "doing the right thing." Maybe you can give us a little bit more clarity. Like, what are the main ethical concerns that regulators have around how AI will be used, and what would you say is doing the right thing?
Sure. So the ethical concerns are kind of revolve around the idea that you want an AI that is trustworthy. So
Hmm.
trust and trustworthiness, these are the key concepts really around the AI Act, but around also a lot of the legislations here in the US. And the idea is that you want an AI that is reliable. So you don't want an AI that it does what it's supposed to do and doesn't fail and doesn't sort of put your people and your users at risk. So that's the first thing. So robustness, reliability. Without that, there's no trust. But then
Right.
there are other aspects, like you want an AI that is concerned about your privacy, doesn't sort of suck up all your data and use it to for its interest, so to speak, to retrain the model or to profile you. So you want to, when you engage with a tool, let's say a tool, a chatbot or a generative AI tool, you want to kind of be feeling sure that you're not kind of giving out all your information, that you're not sort of being tracked, that you're not being spied on. So these are the things that an ethical AI, a trustworthy AI would do. It wouldn't sort of use the information that it gets sort of against you in such a way. The third issue has to do with discrimination and bias. So you want an AI that is fair. You don't want an AI that gives you recommendations based on sort of racial profiling, gender profiling. You don't want an AI that shows only the jobs that are sort of kind of less rewarded or less prestigious because you're a woman. So these are all things that happen. You don't want an AI that denies a loan just because you're a person of color.
Yeah.
So these things are happening. These things are true, and having trust in AI means making sure that this technology doesn't discriminate. And
Mhm.
finally, I think, but importantly, you want an AI that doesn't manipulate you, and that's kind of getting more and more important now that we have this like pretty much everyday interaction with things like ChatGPT and so on. So these are amazing machines, and these machines now are able to talk to you, to write things for you, to interact in a constant sort of stream of back and forth, basically. This is great. This is fantastic. It's very helpful. On the other hand, they can track what you do. They can analyze what you do, your reactions. They know a lot about human beings. And so we get more and more the sense that these machines are slightly manipulative. So they might just push for you to make certain decisions or to think in a certain way, and so the combination between the power of the machine to kind of personalize the output and its power to know so much about you and people like you, that combination can if put in the wrong hands, can actually bring a lot of harm. And so these are sort of the issues are fairness, respect for human autonomy, respect for privacy. These are sort of fundamental rights, and
Right.
on these, like, legislators have worked, and they're drafting very very serious legislations.
Okay. So if we think about something like ChatGPT, then how do we know if it is fulfilling, say, the privacy, the, biases? Like, how do we know what kind of models it's been trained on and whether those models are biased, for example?
Tough question. So here's comes the issue of transparency. So how do we know? Well, sometimes we don't, and there are two things here. We don't because nobody knows. The tools are black boxes. It's very
Mhm.
hard to know what's going on, although there have been technical advances on that. But sometimes it's very hard to know what's going on inside. So there's this problem, and then there's a problem that these are proprietary tools, and so companies don't want to reveal, right? So the first issue, as I said, technology is advancing, so we're going to know more and more about what's going on under the hood. So great. So use the technology to uncover the black box sort of machinery. So one thing to do. The other thing that you can do, the other issue has to do with, well, there are actually open source models. So there are companies out there that decided that they want to make their model open source. Now, this can be, there are pros and cons, but definitely it is a way to ensure quite a degree of transparency. The third thing you can do, if you don't want to open source, you can still provide some show that you've done your homework as a company, so that you're trained your model in a certain way, that you have done boundary testing, that you've done red teaming on your model, that you've done all the things that are reasonably, required in order for you to show that there are not as many biases in the model, that the model has sort of privacy boundaries, and that there's a risk for hallucinating, and you're trying to reduce that, but it's hard to do that. So there are things that can be done on these tools to really show that they're sort of more trustworthy than we actually think. So definitely that's something that is becoming required in the EU. So
Right. And I'm guessing, I mean, just thinking right now as you're talking, I'm sure it's really hard to measure. Like, how do you measure? And this comes back to the philosophy question. Like, how do you measure bias? Like, how do you know and quantify that even? Or is it more like a philosophical, yeah, is there anything being done to try to, judge, say, if a model is being fair, is being non-manipulative? Like, what do these things actually mean, and how do you know? How do you measure them?
I mean, I don't think it's just a philosophical issue. I mean, every model is biased, just to clarify. So the bias is an objective, neutral thing. Then there is discrimination, which is like the unfair part. But so you can test bias within a model by using AI, by using other type of machinery. There are a lot of products out there that can tell you, for instance, whether your this data set you train your model on, was missing certain features or was overrepresenting certain aspects. And you get it, you can trace that. And if that's what you wanted, if that's exactly, no, that's exactly what I want, great. But if that kind of may lead to discrimination, that's not good. So one example, you train your model to recognize melanoma and skin, right? So you're looking at molds, evaluating if pictures of molds are there are signs of melanoma, there are no signs of melanoma. Okay, so you wanted like a categorization of that kind. If you're going to use that tool to a broad population, you want to make sure that the data set you train your model on is representative of the population that you're going to apply the tool
Right.
on, right? Because if you're only doing it with people of like white skin, and then you're actually using it to detect melanoma in people of color, there's a good chance that it won't be able to do it. It won't be as reliable. I think these things you can kind of check. There are various tools that you can use to determine this. Then there are other tools that can determine how the model came to a conclusion, like giving you an evaluation of its certainty or uncertainty. Again, that's something that can be used. So it's nothing particularly philosophical about it.
Okay.
I mean, to be fair, there are various type of notion of fairness that you can employ,
Yeah.
but you can have information about how your tool is performing in a
Yeah.
reasonable way,
Okay.
so that then you make decisions, and then that gets to the ethics side of it. And
Mm.
maybe you'll be like, yes, I know it discriminates, but there's nothing better, and I'd rather do that. And maybe that's a trade-off, and that's ethics. But
Mm.
before, technology can help you get there and make an informed decision.
Okay. So, you're talking a bit about these principles like fairness and privacy. Would you say that there is a general consensus on these principles? I'm guessing, when they made the AI Act, that people came together and talked about what sorts of principles should be governing AI. Would you say there was any debate, or even now, like, is there any debate on what those principles are, or how they should be executed in terms of regulating AI?
Honestly, so in the little bit of history, when sort of around the 2015, 2016, 16, people started really talking about AI ethics, and there was a flurry of principles and frameworks. So you got the European Union one, but also you got like OECD, and you got like UNESCO, like you got the whole thing.
Yeah.
But pretty much they're about the same thing. So there's the privacy, discrimination, fairness, human rights, all that. Now, the debate, at least I'm talking about Europe and US. Maybe there are countries where some aspects like fairness and discrimination are understood slightly differently. Um, I guess the crux of, I mean, the issue now people don't completely agree on is on the open source. So
Mm,
some people are against because it might invite misuse. For instance, if you reveal too much, then that model can be used to do bad. And others are very, very much in favor because it feels like more democratic, more transparent, and so on. So I guess this is one of the things where there is quite a bit of like tension. Um, the I think that the problem is more on the application rather than the big principle. I think that other than the non-transparency, the big principles, everybody agrees that this
okay.
is this is what we want.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about application. I want to hear a bit about the challenges of actually putting these principles into application.
Well, the challenges are immense.
Yeah,
I mean, the issue. I mean, if I tell you, as you said, right? Like, what do you mean by fairness? What do you mean by what does that even mean? Um, the problem is that I can tell you whether your model is biased or skewed or lacks some information or is uncertain. I can give you that, but then, as I said, then you have to make ethical decisions, and ethical decisions means you have to introduce trade-offs. What are your values? Let's say you have a company who's like, this are my values. I want to be fair, just, and so on and so forth. But the technology I'm using is going to be very, very good for this sector of the population, but not as good for a different kind of for another sector of the population. You got to make a decision if that aligns with your values. Maybe you just want to do the right thing, right? But even making that kind of calculation and say, yes, I think that I'm going to adopt this technology anyway because that's the right thing for what for my values. That is an ethical decision. It's very difficult to do. Okay.
yeah,
So just an example. So you're a company that does facial recognition. So facial recognition can be a great thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So it can be a bad thing for two reasons. It can be a bad thing if put in the wrong hands. Like if you have a dictator that uses facial recognition, then they're going to be even stronger in their ability to try
right.
kind of.
Yeah.
But also, I kind of in the policing side of things,
Uh-huh.
like the European Union there's a big debate on that. Like
Okay.
we want privacy, so that everybody wants that. Who doesn't want privacy? But
Right.
now it's like, should we allow facial recognition for police purposes?
Okay. Huh.
And there I think like that's where like when things get a little difficult, because yes and no. Because on the one hand, I don't want to be spied on the whole time I get outside, but on the other hand, I want to have the bad guys tracked and arrested
Right.
so
Yeah.
I think this is where you see that the actual application of a kind of straightforward principle gets hard. So
Hmm.
this is one example where we saw a lot of back and forth in the
Yeah.
AI Act.
Yeah, interesting. I'm wondering if you could give us an example about the workplace, just because a lot of, I guess that's our everyday, we're using AI to perhaps write our emails or, read things for us or write things for us. Do you see any, I guess, yeah, are there any ethical concerns for you about people using AI at work?
Well, using AI at work, so there's it can be done very safely if sort of principles are put in place. People can use, for instance, ChatGPT or the like, in the workplace to streamline their work, to cut costs, to speed up processes. So that's great if you're doing it right. If you're putting guardrail in place that allow you to be safe, to make sure that your proprietary information don't get leaked, like
Mm,
all that. If you do it right, well, that sounds great, right? But then of course there are sort of issues, right? If you're cutting costs, are you going to have to lay off people? So that's a decision that you have to make, right? Or you can try to be creative. Maybe you're not going to lay off people, but you're going to have to redirect those people who now are not that needed for that particular task. You want to retrain them or upskill them so that they can actually do something else. But that requires kind of forward thinking, because if you're just get excited about implementing a fine-tuned model for like conversational generative AI in your workplace because now you're writing emails in like 10 minutes as opposed to 30. This
right.
is fantastic. But you also want to make sure that the people now have got something to do
Mm,
with the other extra 20 minutes. So
yeah.
that requires talking with HR, redirecting them, and so on. A similar example can be the use of a little bit more controversial technology like emotion recognition, for instance. So that can be an enormous help as a technology in the workplace to understand, for instance, is your staff like overworked? Are they enjoying what they're doing? Are what to get feedback? Oh, I don't know what happened there, but to get
You're enjoying what you're doing.
I'm enjoying what I do exactly.
Yeah.
To get feedback or to really get the sense of um, how your stuff is doing. On the other end, it kind of feels like spying on them.
Mm,
And what about if the emotion recognition is incorrect? Now maybe you're seeing things that are not there. So there are a lot of like nuances that guess my bottom line is don't say no to the technology, but do put the guardrails in place before things get really, really messy.
right.
That's, I think, like the bottom line.
Yeah, like we shouldn't be handing over all our decision-making power to the AI because, yeah, I think humans still need to be very involved with like taking that information and figuring out like what to do with the data for sure. Yeah. We have a question from the chat I just want to ask. So Justin asked, is there cultural differences between countries? And I'm guessing with regards to enforcing AI ethics and maybe how AI is being used. Is this culture kind of play into the field of AI ethics?
There are countries and cultures that are very concerned about privacy, for instance. So you might think like here in the US, we value privacy very highly. Same in Europe. There might be other countries that do not think that privacy is really a value, and they see their philosophy maybe and their sort of cultural thinking puts more value on things like common good, right? So individual privacy is less important if there is something good for everybody that we can get by violating privacy. That's totally that we see that happening. This is part of like the difficulty in navigating ethical differences.
Right.
That doesn't mean we cannot find a common ground or it's like kind of a point of convergence. But yeah, I do see that difference quite a bit.
is the AI Act for all countries? Is it an international act, or are there like country-specific regulations?
Act is, if that's what you're asking, is for European citizens.
I see. Okay.
So if you are dealing, if you're a US based company, but you're selling or dealing with people in Europe, it applies to you as well.
Okay.
And there
Okay.
are very hefty fines if
Right.
you do not comply. And and there are sort of different tiers. There are impermissible AI. There is high risk. There's medium risk, and there's low risk. Okay,
Mm,
and these tiers come with different requirements, and these tiers come with different types of fines if you don't comply. So
mm,
it's a very important piece of legislation. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. For sure. So I want to end our interview with some practical applications that our listeners can walk away with, because I've talked about a lot of things, and I want to sort of distill it a little bit for our listeners. So perhaps first we can speak to companies who are hesitant about letting their employees use AI and bring AI to work. What would you say to the managers or HR about how they can help their employees or even their companies with using AI and putting some safeguard rails around that?
So the first thing you need clear set of standards, policies for internal use of AI. You got to tell your people what is okay and what is not okay.
Yeah.
But you also need to train them. So you need to really put some effort in making sure they are clear on how they can use the AI in the most efficient way, because that's another issue. Like if they just kind of start using AI, but they don't know how to do it in an efficient way, that's kind of a waste of time for everybody. So they can get a lot about the AI, but they need to be using it efficiently. So you can teach that. For instance, teaching prompt engineering is still a pretty good thing right now.
Okay.
The second thing you can do is tell them about how to use it safely again. So not just telling what not to do, but like making them understand that there are really danger and harms in misusing this technology. Harms for them, but harms for the company, harms for society at large. And my experience that people are hungry for this kind of knowledge and this kind of awareness, and it needs to be done both as on a general level, so you need to do it for kind of everybody because everybody's using it, whether you know that or not,
Yeah.
and also on a specialized level, so you can tell HR what they're supposed to do when it comes to AI. You can tell the business unit, you can tell other sort of sales. So you can create different persona and create sort of a learning layer around, a training layer around them, and that's what we
Right.
recommend. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's a
it's a big
fairly
question,
easy
huh?
thing to do, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a low hanging fruit to be honest, and there is evidence that it actually works pretty well.
Yeah. So like even training programs or sitting your employees down and talking through the policies of like
Yeah, the
what you
use
can
case.
or
Yeah,
can't put into ChatGPT and privacy things. I'm sure that's will be really helpful.
yeah.
Um, what about the common person? So what about me and you? How what can we be doing? Say we want to learn more, if we want to become more aware about how we can best be using AI. What would you suggest for people like us?
Again, I think awareness is where it all starts. So things like this one raise awareness. People start thinking about how they're using their phone or the AI on their chat GPT or things like that. Like, for instance, do you want to use chat GPT? Do you want to use Anthropic, Anthropic's Claude? Like, it depends. So even a choice like that might come with different ethical impact. Um, know that, well, the privacy limitations we talked about, but also that the AI has limits, and that the kind of things that it gives you are not like the result of an intelligent being, but the result of a sort of mathematical sort of machine, and which is very good, very fast, but also limited in its ability to understand. So don't take everything as true. as you
Right.
were saying, if you use AI in your hiring process, first of all, there are, in the US, there are legislations that require you to go through an audit process. If you do that, just for you should know, but it does come with a lot of risk. So put a human at the end of the process always. Don't let the AI decide everything, because that's problematic. So there are various things that we can do. There are a ton of courses online, ton of lectures,
Okay.
and then the hard thing is to keep up, because
Mm.
it's
It's
kind of
such a
moving so
fast.
fast that yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Marianna. I'm sure this discussion was very insightful for a lot of people. I think it's such a, as you said, like a fast evolving field. We're just trying to keep up with everything going on. And so I'm sure this was the first step for many people in thinking about, yeah, AI ethics and where that's going. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, and if people are curious about this stuff, they should definitely reach out on LinkedIn. I'm there, like I'm very approachable through LinkedIn. Is the best way to talk to me and reach out to me. And I hope that sort of helped people to start thinking about how to put some risk mitigation in place to avoid the bad consequence of using AI in the long run.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you so much again, Marianna.
Thank you.